to show a little bit, especially the 2840s are the earliest in the plot. Most years we almost always, our beans almost always canopy together. This year we just was dry enough, they really didn't. If there's a disadvantage to 30-inch rows, that might be it, that they don't canopy quite as fast. One year I did a plot, I had 30-inch rows, 15-inch rows, and 8-inch rows, and there was only like a half a bushel difference.
Okay. And
I like planting them with a corn planter. I only plant about a bag to the acre, about 140, 145,000 is all I plant. Some guys are up at 210,000, that's too many. I mean, I like selling seed, but if they want to save money, you can save money, you really don't need to. Because with a corn planter, you get better singulation, you get better, I think, seed to soil contact, because those press wheels do a better job. Even though a drill has a press wheel on, it still doesn't push like what a corn planter does. And I think a drill has a tendency to have your beans higher and lower. So a corn planter, if you set it at 1.5 inches, they just stay at 1.5 inches. In a test plot like this, you have to wait for the early ones to mature, or the later ones to mature before you can do the early ones. So the early ones are really ready a little bit before, but that's about the only way you can do a soybean test plot. So there usually isn't much difference. As long as you don't get a lot of rains in between. I've always heard that soybeans, if you get rain on them, then they dry down, they lose a little bit of test weight. So let's say that those 2/8s get ready, and let's say we get 4 or 5 rains on it before the 3/4s get ready up there. Test weight could be a little bit lower, which will affect yield a little. Interesting, when we get up to the 3/4s, I don't know if there's still any blossoms on there or not from the rains we had a while back. I was in somebody's beans the other day that did have just a few blossoms of fuller season bean, and I said, well, if we get the right rains and right conditions, those blossoms will produce some more pods. And that's where your extra yield really comes from, when you get that extra on top. And we like to harvest them all at the same time so that, we're going to do it at the same time.
With just a little bit of feeding, do you know what's been going through here?
I do not. If there is, it's just been lately there's been, my guess is, earlier on, we saw some Japanese beetles out in here. I've seen grasshoppers. I think it's more on the edges. As you go back, it looks like they're not quite eating quite as much. So the outside edges, we almost always see. Some of this,
it's not bad, that's for sure. And it can look worse than it really is.
Yeah, it takes a lot of holes to make up 30%.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any spider mites in these. If it really gets dry, you can get spider mites in them. The leaves will kind of look a little like that, maybe, huh? With spider mite, they kind of get a yellowish. You can take a piece of paper if you're worried about if you have them, and then just turn this whole plant and shake it. And if you've got spider mites, they'll be real little things. You just almost can't see them with the naked eye, but it's got to really be dry, or spider mites will really cause a big problem. But my guess is it's probably grasshoppers and Japanese beetles is what I guess. Is there a stink bug in there? See, I don't know on the outside area if that's tended to make them come in, because if you look farther back, you don't see it. It looks like that first, 15, 20 feet have some, then they're not quite as bad.
Yeah, I had seen just one stink bug in here when we came up, but they usually feed on the pods.
On the pods, yeah. And I didn't look to see if there's any pod damage.
I thought I saw one that had some black spots I was going to pick and look at.
Yeah.
But overall, they look really good still.
And they pretty well filled. There's one that probably aborted early. It was a two bean pod. There was a 3 bean that only made 1. Probably right when those were really setting good, my guess is it was probably pretty dry, and it was, and they probably aborted to try to make it, because now you look up at the top and almost all of these are filled. Yeah. That helps. Here's a 4 bean pod. That's what a lot of these guys like to find, 4 beans in a pod. Yeah. And a lot of your newer technology beans have that 4 beans in a pod. But like I say, this little bit of feeding, even though I don't like to see it, you know, it's probably not going to hurt you as late as it is this year. And now that we've got plenty of moisture, I don't think it's going to cause as much trouble either.
The root is plenty muddy, but you can kind of see some of the nodulation where soybean are creating its own nitrogen source, all these nodules, loaded top to bottom with pods.
And see, now this doesn't look like very many of these aborted. So in other words, it was in a better position late enough that the drier weather really didn't seem to affect that. Where that earlier bean thought, well, it's too dry, I can't make all my beans, so I'm just going to get rid of a few of them, so a few of them abort. Where this one doesn't look like it was in that.
Those big beans.
And that's another reason why you would want to plant multiple maturity ranges of beans. Number one, so they're not all ready at the same time, but some of them will take advantage, all these fuller season will take advantage of the late season rains, which I think really can make a difference.
How big those are.
Oh yeah, they are. Yeah.
It's a real advantage to have larger beans. You know, you hope for that 4-bean pod, but it's really not that realistic.
Yeah.
So if you fill your bean with 3-bean pods that are larger, it really fills the bin.
Probably 3-4 years ago, I bought a little sprayer and we were doing a lot of foliar feeding. In fact, it's going to be in the field that we're going to next where the corn is. But when we had it in soybeans, we were spraying different foliar feedings on each. I planted the whole field the same variety, and then we replicated 3 times across. And I never could get one treatment to replicate every time. We could get sometimes a bean to put on 20 more pods, but the yield was exactly the same. That what happened, the one that had the less pods, the beans just got bigger. The ones that had less pods, the ones that had more pods, seemed to the beans stayed smaller. So the yield, actually there was no difference in yield at all, but we could get it to put more pods on, and we tried everything we could think of to try to get those extra pods to fill bigger like that, and we never could do it. We finally gave up, and we worked on that probably for 3 or 4 years, foliar feeding, trying to get it to get extra yield, and we never could get anything that would replicate.